This episode is brought to you by Target.
Hi, good morning. It's Star Wars Week. Look at us go. Hello. Today we're going to be talking, y'all have been asking us to talk about Watchmen. Oh, we are talking about Watchmen today. We are going to talk about that brand new, as Ed called it, Danger Zone trailer for Top Gun and some other great fun things. So first, we're going to talk about this Watchmen, obviously via Rolling Stone, plus and HBO. So the season 1 finale of Watchmen did air last night, and interestingly, Damon Lindelof spoke to Rolling Stone's Alan Sippenwall after the finale, and he's saying that he's not saying he'll never want to do more Watchmen himself, but there is currently apparently no plans for a second season, saying every single idea that we had is on screen and presented in these 9 episodes. So first, we're just kind of generally, no spoilers. What did y'all think of the finale?
It was quite good.
Man, throw up that dance. Let's recap the show.
All right.
Oh, you want to just see yourself dance?
We're doing spoilers.
It's a season recap on that thumb. Put up that beautiful man dancing. Yeah! Look at him. Man, she ate that egg. It's got Dr. Manhattan powers in it. That lady just walked on water. I love the show, man. I did not want to like this show at all.
I didn't either. I was
at all,
because the marketing around it and everything, it is a completely different show than what I think, which is on purpose and which was great. And this is one of those times where I'm glad that instead of just like rushing to judgment, all of us kind of collectively like sighed and said we're just going to trust the creators on this one, that it's going to go somewhere that where it's not looking like it is now, and it did, and that's great.
Yeah, but also I really think this benefited from microphones. I think this really benefited from not being bingeable. You know what I mean? Like, you had to sit and ruminate with it. We've talked up more Mandalorian. We've talked up some of these shows that are on this release schedule, almost old school style, and just each episode got bigger and bigger in your head in that week. And then you want to. I guarantee you, if this was bingeable, some dork would have been like, "Oh, if they of course, all of those hot takes would have came out." And I think this is not impenetrable to those, but it's harder to pick this apart because over the course of the week, you think what's going to happen in the next episode, and you're wrong. Yep. You're wrong every time. You think you know what's going to happen in the next episode, you're wrong every time, and that's fantastic.
I'm a big fan of Lindelof's, but especially HBO Lindelof's, because I think Leftovers is just amazing TV. So I was excited for this show, but it was also like, look, this could go bad very easily. Yeah. Just Watchmen itself as a property, being a sequel to Watchmen, and I think this was best case scenario. You know, it was like, this was a great show that I think took the world of Watchmen, really built off it, and I love the finale. It wasn't my favorite episode, but it was still a great episode, and it wasn't my favorite because they delivered so many great episodes through the season that I think, like you were saying, with the release schedule, you really could think about everything that happened, both the reveals but also the social issues they were getting into. I just thought this show, it came in, I tweeted this last night, like, came in right at the end and said, hey, you think you got your best of the year, best of the decade list set? It's like, no, we're gonna throw you a curveball here.
Yeah, no, it literally blue curved something.
I saw a lot of tweets about that last night.
And that was a great thing, is that it did.
That was a great thing.
Well, I was going to say about the historical and how they talked about the Tulsa fire. But yeah, we had like all of Twitter literally looking up the Black Wall Street fire, which is again an amazing thing. Yes, there was all of that. But for me, it was a great way to be able to deal with, because if anyone who's like didn't think that Watchmen was ever like not political, I don't know what book or movie you've seen.
Yeah, at this point, you're either dense or not, or dense on purpose, which is also bad.
Well, also, I was listening to Damon Lindelof has talked a bunch, so I've listened to a bunch of stuff that he said, and one of the things he did say was like, and I just got to say it, white people think of legacy as, look at this thing I have achieved. I've dropped it down to my kids, and they will drop it down to their kids. Oh, this largesse, The ones who can speak of it like that, the ones who can think of it that way, which is not all white people, obviously. But the black people in this show and the black people all across the world, a lot of the times, have an inverse legacy. that they have, right? So they don't have all this laudatory, like, oh, look how awesome my grandpa was, because your grandpa was probably serving somebody that everybody thinks is awesome. You know what I mean? So dealing with the fact that legacy...
They don't have a Downton Abbey house in their background.
Right. Yeah. But legacy and trauma are flip sides of the same coin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Look at Ed over here.
I'm just extrapolating.
I want to give you this.
I want the jet trooper.
Okay, you can have the jet trooper because I liked what you said.
Can you just throw like a baby at the end of it so that I feel like feeling about how smart you just were?
I hide it well, but I'm just saying, like, that's what was interesting about it to me. Is like everybody's past, everybody's intricate secret history isn't so fraught with all this awesome adventure. Sometimes it's pain and it's hurt. And at the end, when he talks about, masks. You got to take a mask off to heal a wound.
Wounds need air. Wounds need air. My line of the season. That was so good.
And I think this whole series is doing a little bit of that. Airing out, like, the fact that people didn't know about Tulsa. Air it out, baby. Take the mask off. Let's see what people that look like you did and what people who look like me experienced. And let's kind of understand what it is instead of sweeping it under the rug. Because if there's one thing Watchmen teaches us, you can't deceive everybody.
Right.
And have it stand. Nothing lasts forever.
Yeah, at some point.
That being said, they made that squid look really cool. And I did not think it was ever going to be possible for that squid to look cool.
Yeah.
That squid looked amazing. It was like, even the little baby squids all looked really cool. But the squid itself, when you see it in the opening of that Looking Glass episode, and you just see like that big eye, it looked great, and on a TV budget, like, that's amazing.
I was really impressed, like, watching that finale last night, how, it did what you wanted a, quote, Watchmen sequel to do, which is it brought together all the characters, and we got to see, like, Adrian and Laurie back together, while also completely servicing, Angela and all these new plot lines that the show was really about, and making sure sort of everything got equal time, everything got equal weight, and so one thing wasn't pushed aside for the other, and that's a hard balancing act. I mean, she literally sort of like runs from frozen squid falling from the sky that can impale people into this theater, into something else incredibly important about the show that was the way the show began, and this incredibly important conversation, and they made it work, and it could have all fallen apart.
And speaking of Angela, we've got to get into the Regina King of all of this.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
She is, I guess I never would have pinned the girl from 227 as being one of my favorite, like, action stars now, but holy crap. She was doing great. She posted, like, all the, talking about her workouts and how much running she's been doing in all of these series. I think that this award season, she has not been, there's no reason why she wasn't nominated for one of the SAG Awards for this. It was kind of a real big bummer.
Well, honestly, I think it's a we still snub our noses at genre stuff.
Absolutely,
I think by the time everyone was like, holy, we have like a masterpiece on our hands, like everyone's already sort of got it in their head, like, oh, well, I must be voting for this or that, and this is a comic book show. Which is a dumb bias. A dumb biase. It's a real dumb bias.
Well, it's incredibly reductive.
I earned a Vader. Remember when Ed was like flip side legacy drama, the same thing? I'm so glad I get to be at this table. I've earned it. This is comic books. This is pop culture at its finest. It has something to say. There's a message behind it. It is just like any good fable or mythic piece of storytelling. You are getting a story about a blue guy who doesn't put on pants to get a better look into this idea or this point in history.
Absolutely.
You're getting laser swords to get a better idea of this point in history. And this show just cranked on all cylinders.
Everyone got moved. I was thinking last night how, we are so lucky as geeks, as comic book fans, to be like, the fact that this year we had Endgame and Watchmen. I was like, that's everything you can dream about, right? Yeah. Like this amazing Avengers movie that put together all these characters and the spectacle, and I think some great emotional moments too. Yeah. And then Watchmen, which is obviously very philosophical and social issues. I mean, and they're both so good. I was like, this is an embarrassment of riches.
And can we talk for a second about plotting a show around a person who is in the future and the past at the same time? Somebody basically omniscient, but still having them be, for lack of a better word, tied to the way things are because of determinism, right? It happened because it happened. I died because I died. I can't change that. Why can't you change that? I can't. I died.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That like obtuseness and his lack of imagination is fantastic, because we always, in comic books, we're always like so used to Tony Stark making a time machine out of a can of Coke and some tape. You know what I mean? We're so used to that. When if I made anybody at this table a god tomorrow, we would have 1,000 million years of stuff to do, or be paralyzed, but all the stuff we could do, or go to Mars and freak out, or whatever. It would not be as simple as.
Well, there's an interesting thing about the Dr. Manhattan 2. The look of him, I'm still blue. Ozymandias says, like, if someone goes looking for that power, we have to stop them at all costs. And you have multiple parties that are trying to chase that power, but then you have once the power's gone, someone saying, you know what, with everything he was capable of, he should have done more. So you have this idea of, like, could he have? Because he's so tied into just how things are because of the predeterminism, like you said.
Right.
You know, I think that's an interesting thing to look at too. Like, does that omnipotence like give you? You've got that amazing bit about Hitchcock and Superman that you do. Like, you know, does that massive power like grant you to the ability to fix things in the micro? Or you know, I think there's like or is it too much to where it's like, okay, well now I see the pattern, now
and
I see the wheel.
The whole series is about somebody thinking that they can be the god of everybody and tell everybody what to do or resolve everybody's problems. Adrian Veidt is so much more Superman than any of these other characters, because he's inflicted his will. Even his seed inflicts its will upon our world.
She's amazing, by the way.
You know what I mean? We gotta talk about that.
Senator?
We gotta talk about that.
Is he in here?
Oh god, I wanted to mention Hong Chow because I didn't really know her before this, and what a great performance! You know, great dialogue. That part where she talks about the corpses, and she's like, "I bet that sounds like a really cool story." And I thought, because you know, it was interesting because Adrian, I think I saw some people either criticize or just point out that Adrian certainly was a much more sort of mannered, quirky in this show than in the comic book, but I loved it. I thought it was just a fun way to go with like the super genius, which is a comic book cliche. Yeah, and then she's his daughter, and she's got a whole different energy, but also funny and quirky. And yeah, I loved it. I love that she was sort of one step ahead. A lot of people were like, "Oh, look at the 7th Cavalry. They're using her equipment. They're probably secretly working together." But then it turns out she basically let them steal her stuff and let them do this work for her.
Very Ozymandian.
Yeah. And then all the payoffs I thought were great with like that he was writing daughter, like what was the word with D? Is it Dan? Is it Dr. Manhattan? And then the statue being him the whole time.
That was the one point of the whole thing where I was just like, you know what? I did the weird Shia LaBeouf clap. I did that in my house.
So does this work for, say we don't get another season, does the ending of it work for you, or does it feel like too much of a cliffhanger?
I mean, for me, it's, and I don't like this movie that much, but it's a spinning top in Inception. It's if the top stops spinning, then you know one thing or the other. But when it keeps spinning but looks like it's wobbling, you don't know. And sometimes you don't know is the perfect ending. The ending of the first Matrix movie. He flies off into the sky, knowing damn well he's going to have to fight a bunch of squiddies and do a bunch of stuff and maybe free a bunch more people, but at least they have a chance now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe in this world, a more imaginative person, a person who's more connected with the trauma, even though now that we look at Osterman, he was connected with trauma, but he couldn't connect to it. He had to get away from it. Whereas she's Regina King, you know what I'm saying? So maybe her with the powers could be very interesting, but we don't necessarily need to see it, to me.
Yeah, I don't know that I would want to see a whole series about Super Regina King. I find her interesting. I mean, I love that that's how it ended.
Exactly.
But I don't want to see more of her being super. She can be off doing super stuff somewhere else. Maybe we follow a different character for a season and do more of a Fargo style anthology.
Well,
Sister Night is on the moon.
The challenge too is the meta of that. And the meta is weirdly so important, I feel like, with Watchmen, is Lindelof went into this being like, I have a story to tell. And I feel like a season 2 becomes a literal Babadook for Alan Moore, where it's like, well, now there's a season 2 because season 1 did well. right? Now we have, and they might find a great story, but it's in service of season 1 did well, and not because we have a story that we have to get out there.
Well, and he's saying also mentioning in this Rolling Stone interview is that he doesn't know that he would want to come back for a season 2. He might bring someone else on and have them show run it, like he might hand off his toys, but he wouldn't want to. Now, would you want to see a Watchmen season 2 not ran by Lindelof?
Showrunner Zack Snyder. Let's go.
Well, you know what I was thinking about this is this show has made me want to do the unthinkable. I want to go back and reread Watchmen, which is not something I've wanted to do.
Right. Well, I got the ultimate
years.
Watchmen. It's this big.
Yeah.
Absolute Watchmen.
I want to do that again. I don't, but I do now. Watchmen is such a cool story of ideas. And that's one reason why I want to go back and read it, because I'm like, is that humor there? Is that heart there? And maybe I just didn't necessarily see it because I was so wrapped up in the concept of Watchmen. But it's a thing about ideas, and what I think works really well about what Lindelof has done is those ideas are still front and center, but he's been able to balance it so much with this show. With heart, with empathy, with compassion, in a way that I think a filmmaker like Snyder is really fascinated about the ideas. And for him, the ideas were enough for the Watchmen feature. Because I feel like the feature adaptation of Watchmen, and maybe even Man of Steel a little bit, he loves his ideas and his concepts. And I feel like Lindelof was able to trick you into taking those vitamins a little better. You know, he mixed that medicine in with like
put some cheese on your broccoli.
Yeah, exactly. A little spoonful of sugar. Not to diminish what he did at all. I mean that it's just he was just able to balance it out to like round it out a little more.
Well, a little bit more of the humanity, a little bit more of the heart.
And I think first, I personally don't consider that ending a cliffhanger. You know, I do like Lindelof's point that it's like the comic book has the will Rorschach's notes get printed. Yeah. What will it do? Yeah. Everything doesn't need to be tied up in a bow, and I feel like we got a complete story here. And also Lindelof kind of even says like she probably walks on the water because that's the more interesting thing. But as far as like continuing it without him, my first instinct is no, because we're so lucky that this turned out well. But I actually liked what Lindelof said about, hey, who am I to say you can't play with these toys when I'm doing it with someone else's? So you never know. Like if a Noah Hawley or someone else came along and said, I have a great idea for Watchmen, whether it be, what happens right after this, or as Lindelof points out, you could do it in all sorts of eras. There's lots of other things you could tell. Like I was a little sad that, thank you.
Don't want you calling 911 while we're on the air.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Help me, I'm in a public conversation.
For preventing a 911 call on YouTube, you get a fin.
Thank you.
But it's like, I personally, it's one of those things where I have to understand that it's okay not to get everything, because I would have liked to have seen Dan, Night Owl.
Right, yeah.
He's the one character from the comic book who's still alive, who shows up. But I also realized it's probably best we didn't see him, because if he has no actual purpose, we got this little info, we know he's locked up somewhere. It's like, hey, I'm here too, guys. Like, we don't need that.
Yes, absolutely not. Like, I don't need it to be like, well, everything is just like in the same space.
Yeah.
Just to have him there,
Right.
I would much rather have it be in service of the story. Do we have any kind of final Watchmen thoughts?
Well, the one thing that it can't be overstated is this is the way you introduce new characters and still pay respect to all of the plot threads from the original thing, to me. Because we get to see who Hooded Justice was. Why can't Hooded Justice take off his damn mask? Why is Hooded Justice HJ and everybody's, hey, Mr. Johnson, hey, whatever. They're all calling each other by their names, drinking punch, having a good time. And Hooded Justice is over there with his mask on, hot as hell. Why? We found out why. Yeah. And we found out that... I love the way that tabloids tell you part of the story.
Right.
Oh, we knew that Captain Metropolis was having this affair with Hooded Justice, but we didn't know exactly all of the.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that to me too is that isn't necessarily even a rabbit hole that Alan Moore was necessarily concerned with. I don't know. I mean, obviously he put in lots of questions, but in terms of like the big questions you've always had about Watchmen, what I love about that one is that's Damon Lindelof's question about Watchmen.
Yeah, he said him and his dad were reading it together, and that was something they fixated on.
I love that.
Yeah, Hooded Justice had to be involved in the comedian's murder. No, he didn't.
Right.
No, he didn't. There's so much more to this than I just finally I love part of the last episode of like someone taking it's almost like the Promethean thing, right? You steal the fire from the gods.
Right.
True's mom stealing the fire from the loins, I guess, of Adrian Veidt, so that because again, man, it isn't just that he's the smartest dude. He had a bunch of like privilege to get where he got, and you know what I mean. He was able to go off in eat peyote, think about stuff all the time. It's one of the things I pound home all the time. You think certain people, certain classes of people, certain whatever people aren't intelligent. They just don't have the time to sit around and gaze at their navels like you do, dummy.
There's an interesting hubris there with what he says too. Just to go off of that, where he's like, "No, I wanted nothing from my parents," and it's like, but still, like in your little lizard brain, you knew it was there.
Yep.
That's interesting to me, like the hubris of being like, "No, I walked away from my fortune," and like. Still had my name, you know. Like there's no way that no investors, when he was like 19, were going to be like, yeah, no, we're not working with that.
And when he came into rooms, he wasn't a 20-year-old Vietnamese lady going, "Hey, I need $42 billion." He was a white man from a great family who was obviously very educated. Educated meaning training for life in capitalistic society
and catching bullets.
Right? You know what I mean? So that I just loved that they talked about that, but without taking away and all this, they will not replace us, Jazz. You never see that Veidt is whack. Veidt is dope. He catch bullets at 65. He's super smart. He can escape a prison on a moon somewhere. And another place. He can escape.
Was I a worthy adversary? Nope.
Yeah, right. What an a-hole. So just as a final comment, this whole thing is a master class in. You will not replace us. We're not trying to replace you. We're trying to broaden the canvas and paint some other characters. And your characters will still remain. They'll be as powerful as they ever were. Veidt is magnificent in this. But we see other people who can challenge him. We see other types of people who can challenge him, other brands, you know, and I just love all of that. That's why I love
really
this.
Well said.
Yeah, it took a great piece of art and it expanded upon it, reflected it. You know, it's like Watchmen doesn't need to be improved, but this just showed how, hey, it can inspire something else great and build upon it. Yep. I was fascinated. I was looking at Twitter last night and seeing people who clearly have not read the comics. Of course, a ton of people watching the show did not read the comics. I was so glad they were into it. Of course, everything's not going to land for them. They didn't understand where the weird underwear Keen is wearing came from, you know, and they don't know that Adrian's caught a bullet before. But that's okay. You can just watch this show, and it's a great story. But then some people will go back and read the comic for the first time, and that's awesome because now they're getting this thing put in front of them that they never would have been curious about before. You know, it's a win-win to me.
Yes.
All right, you guys, spoilers are over. All Dunsies with spoilers. Bye, Joe. Bye, Dancing Joe. All right.
Dancing in our hearts forever.
Thank y'all so much for, you guys do all of the liking and the subscribing, and you're telling your friends about all the cool stuff that we do. You turn on the notifications. You hit that bell. You're the reasons why we get to do all of the cool stuff that we're doing. We get to sit here and talk about Watchmen, which I love. Thank you all so much for all of your support.
If you were here, I would give you this Vader.
And my axe. I mean, Jet Trooper.
And my Jet Trooper.
We do have a new episode of Power Levels, Captain Marvel and Thor versus Wonder Woman and Superman. So that one's not going to make people mad at all. And also, don't forget, Never Surrender, our documentary about Galaxy Quest, is available for pre-order. It's out tomorrow, y'all. So for everyone who was like, I can't wait to see it, you got one day, one more sleep, and then you get to watch Never Surrender.
Get on that iTunes.
Yeah, get on that iTunes. We're really excited. I think it came out great. So go check that out. And again, because we do have this platform, we're really, really lucky to have. We want to be able to kind of pay that forward and spread some of that love with organizations that do really good work. And so we right now want to highlight 826LA, which is a nonprofit which is dedicated to supporting under-resourced students ages 6 to 8 with creative and expository writing skills. It helps teachers inspire their kids to write. So you can click for more down in the description below. I love that we're working with this organization in this way because I think it's so important to be able to not only be able to write and express yourself creatively, but also you got to be able to write stuff to get jobs. You just kind of do.
Yeah, it's also not just creative short stories and stuff like that. Like they help kids with their high school kids with their college essays. Yeah. Stuff like that. It's such a cool and an important tool.
Yeah, so thank you all so much. Again, click down if you want to learn more about them. Next, we're talking about that Danger Zone. Top Gun trailer did drop for Top Gun Maverick. It dropped today. I got to watch Ed watch it. It was quite delightful.
We wanted Ed to do the official voiceover.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could do the score.
Spot on.
Yeah, perfect. It's really fun watching someone just go.
Why hire the orchestra?
Yeah, why get a band? So, what stood out to all of you about the trailer itself?
Oh, look, no matter how mighty I think my wings are, there are still some things that take my breath away. And
Thank you for that.
yeah, this was more of a gauge of who likes this soundtrack a lot.
It's a classic soundtrack.
Well, dude, I just like the fact that I'm up here playing with the boys.
Well said, lover boy. Oh man. Aftertaste of sunsets, that's just one of life's simple joys, my friends. I mean, I think when this movie was announced, you could hear the. I don't think anyone was unexcited or but you could almost hear the state of movie making and what we think we're capable of doing now in people's assumptions of what this movie was going to be. Oh, it's all going to be all CGI, or it's going to be like he has to teach drone pilots or something like there's no majesty in the idea of an F-16 dogfighting anymore, this and that.
Yeah.
And here comes a trailer that is just straight up Navy footage, aviation. I love it. Put this in my veins. I grew up with an older brother who is a pilot, loves this movie. He went to Auburn University, and him and his boys had a trailer, and it was just like every piece of furniture was just a subwoofer. Like everybody's desk was a subwoofer. You ate on a subwoofer. The hot plate was on a subwoofer, and this movie was just on all the time. And it shook you until your Dr. Manhattan powers fell out of your body.
Yeah.
And it just I love this movie. I've grown up with this movie as an important part of my household and life, and yeah, I'm stoked, man.
Yeah, I did not. So it is fine. But no, the trailer looks great. Miles Teller's little mustache.
Take it away.
Oh no!
Dude, it's just to watch you wax on, wax off both Maverick and Ghostbusters in the last 2 weeks. Just like, no, this is okay. Yeah.
But again, I haven't seen it, so maybe I'll go in there and I'll just come out and just like tears of like, oh, I get it. The sky is beautiful.
Goose's boy is named Rooster, Danielle. Rooster.
Thanks, I hate it. And you know Rooster's gonna mean not obviously Goose, but also like he's the word I can't say of the walk or whatever, something like that. You
can say cock of the walk.
Can I? Well, you just did.
Contextually.
So now I don't have to.
Yeah.
Contextually,
it works.
It's a bird.
It's a bird.
I did not grow up a huge Top Gun fan of like all the sort of 80s perennials. It just didn't resonate with me.
What's happening?
Who are these people?
I will say this, a couple things. I mean, this movie's existence is funny because it basically exists because the Mission Impossible series keeps being so huge for Paramount. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because the two, this is their big movie next summer, and then the next 2 summers after that are Mission Impossible 7 and 8. They're like, it's funny, a few years ago they were kind of on the outs with Tom Cruise, but now they're like way back in the Tom Cruise business.
Yeah.
But this is an impressive trailer, and it basically says, hey, this is a movie you do not want to wait for at home. You do not want to watch on Netflix because it's such spectacle. Obviously, Cruise's thing these days is he's doing all this himself, but you're in the cockpit, and it just like, this looks like an amazing sort of visual sound. See it on an IMAX, see it on a huge screen, and I like that.
Yeah, and also the thing we don't understand. Oh, I think a lot of us understand this, but like Tom Cruise has slowly made himself into America's Jackie Chan. Yeah. Right before our eyes. I'm really doing this. It's a matter of interest. This is the reason why I'm the last movie star. Mm-hmm. Because you don't really have to that often CGI my face on some poor stunt guy.
You know what I mean? 30 years younger than me.
Right. You don't have to do that often. Sometimes when I'm pulling up the helicopter and the engines fail, it's me going, the insurance is gonna go crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I love that about it, and it's one thing that's really interesting about it. Also, I think them trying their damnedest to have him have an almost age-appropriate interest. Can we talk about it? Oh
Right,
boy,
it's
they're
Jennifer
trying.
Connelly,
Yeah.
who was like 15 in the mid 80s while he was already doing Top Gun, but it's like, and
yeah.
for Hollywood, it's still a miracle.
Oh,
that
it's like-
she's
it's like,
not 30, you know?
It's like, wow, thank you. She's got 2 crow's feet. Excellent.
Oh man, speaking of Regina
Maverick, this
King-
is your new assistant, Dakota Fanning.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, I want to see him and Regina King have a runoff one day.
Yeah.
Just like Tom Cruise, Regina King, and Will Smith, just running.
Just running.
I'm not gonna lie.
On your left.
I honestly think a big screen Mission Impossible romance between Regina King and Tom Cruise. You just put that in my head. And that's like the hottest on-screen couple I think I've ever imagined. I don't
just like
know,
this
just
sick-
running at each other.
Like they're both such grizzled agents, and
Yes.
and they can remember all these times, and like the back
Yeah.
into the Cold
Put
War,
her in the next
all the way
Mission
back to the
Impossible.
Cold War, they were fighting, and now it's like 2020, and they're just like, I'm getting too old for this.
She
Absolutely
could be
watch that.
Agent 227.
And but no, I think this is
Mary.
I think this is going to be super fun, man. I'm so excited. Like you said, this is something that you're going to need to see on an IMAX. I think just like Lindelof was like, these are the things I want to explore. And so, like I've been saying for 4.5 minutes, I am so excited for Top Gun 2, guys. I've seen a lot of people that keep complaining, no Danger Zone in the trailer. What, are you kidding me? No, you got to earn Danger Zone. You don't just get to go to the zone. I think
that was the most beautiful pithy thing
thank
that
you for
you've ever
making me
said on
cry
here.
just
It
now.
was great.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I feel like I get it now.
No, Rooster Bumps. This is the sequel.
Rooster Bumps are the new Goosebumps.
Goosebumps his head.
We're all the worst people. Speaking of, we're going to do something right now I'm really excited for. Joe.
Yeah,
fun thing.
Yeah, we're gonna close out with something fun today. This is a cool treat for you guys. We started shooting this thing way back at San Diego Comic-Con. This is a little thing we created. We're calling it Fandomatics. And basically, we went to Comic-Con. We asked people at the con what their ideal ending for Rise of Skywalker was. Some people took it very seriously. Some people did not. We kind of mashed all of those responses together, and we got a really, really cool artist to sort of do an animatic storyboard of them. Yeah, I'm really excited for you guys to see this. I'm really happy with how it came out. Yeah, you want to say goodnight to the folks, and we'll close out to it.
Let's do it. All right, so stay tuned. That's happening right after this, and we will see you back here tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
I love it.
What would I like to see happen in Episode 9?
My perfect ending for the next Star Wars movie.
Perfect ending.
My ideal ending for Episode 9.
My perfect Episode 9 ending. I think we gotta redeem Kylo Ren once again.
Kylo Ren and Rey actually become lovers. They like team up and then just kill everybody off.
I need for Rey and Kylo to end up together if they end up not being related.
I think they really need Rey to actually be related to somebody.
As long as she's not a Skywalker. A Kenobi would be cool, though.
Kylo Ren will sacrifice himself to save Rey and Finn and Poe, and he will sacrifice himself to kill the Emperor.
I think Luke will come back as a Force ghost, but I think he's just going to kind of hang out.
They really need to bring Captain Phasma back. She was really underused, and if they just brought her back as a villain, that would be absolutely amazing.
If Phasma comes back, she should just immediately get beat up again.
So there's a lot of talk about people coming back. Palpatine, Luke Skywalker. Screw them. I don't care. I want Darth Maul back. I want Darth Maul to come in with his tentacle legs or whatever he has nowadays and kill Rey.
What I would like Rey to be is Darth Maul's daughter.
Search your feelings. You know it to be true.
And Maul will be the new Supreme Leader.
I think they should rule the galaxy as Sith father and daughter.
R2-D2 to be appointed as general.
I'd like to see balance to the Force. He represents the darkness, she represents the light, and they come together to form hopefully something new.
If you want to do a little fan service and throw in some Easter eggs for the prequels and maybe even some of the cartoons, I'll be as equally happy. If they put Ahsoka Tano in Episode 9, the slightest reference, I might jump out of my seat.
And that is where the galaxy thus embarks from, the middle of the light and the dark.
This holiday, the toys of a generation of Star Wars fans come home. Explore a whole galaxy of Star Wars toys available at Target.